In one short chain of strikes, Russian vehicles carrying troops, ammunition, and supplies were detected and destroyed almost as soon as they appeared, showing how much faster the battlefield kill cycle has become than in the early phase of the war. That is what makes this story so serious. The real shock is not only that multiple vehicles were hit. It is that some of them were struck while still carrying soldiers, still loaded with ammunition, or just after stopping to prepare for the next push. That means one drone impact can now do far more than destroy a single target. A new battlefield logic is taking shape in Ukraine, where drones do not only hunt vehicles on the road. They also expose hidden troops, threaten artillery in covered positions, cut into communications, and make even small resupply runs feel dangerous. In this kind of war, the line between front and rear is becoming harder to see because aerial pressure keeps reaching deeper into the system that keeps an army moving. Stay with us, because the real value of this story is not only seeing what was destroyed, but understanding how this constant pressure from above is quietly changing the way the war is fought. And if supply vehicles, forest shelters, communication antennas, and even night movement are no longer safe, then how much real space for survival is Russia still able to hold on this battlefield? What makes this part of the war so dangerous is not only the explosion of an FPV drone, but the speed of the chain behind it, because the real threat now begins before the strike, at the moment a target is first seen and marked for destruction. Ukrainian reconnaissance teams are watching the battlefield almost without pause, and that constant observation is changing what movement means for Russian forces. A vehicle does not need to reach the front line to become vulnerable. It can be spotted while moving along a dirt road, while turning near a tree line, while driving with lights on and fading light, or while stopping for only a short moment near a forward position. These details matter because the drone team does not need a long window. It only needs one clear sighting, one confirmed route, or one pause that lasts just long enough to fix the target in place. Once that happens, the next step follows very fast. The reconnaissance drone acts like the eyes, scanning the ground, reading movement, and confirming what kind of target has appeared. The FPV unit then acts like the striking hand, moving in before the target can reset the situation. That coordination is now one of the most important battlefield advantages Ukraine has built. The danger does not come from a single drone working alone. It comes from a linked process where one system sees, another receives, and another attacks. The distance between those steps is now so short that Russian crews often have little time to react once they have been identified. This is why the battlefield feels more hostile than before. In earlier periods, being observed did not always mean being hit right away. There could still be a narrow chance to unload troops, hide the vehicle, pull back, or move under cover before the strike arrived. Now that margin is getting smaller. A tank that slows down to avoid rough ground may already be giving the strike team enough time to close in. A driver who thinks a short stop beside a ruined structure is safe may actually be making tracking easier. Even a small change in direction can reveal a pattern from above, because what looks cautious on the ground can look predictable in the drone feed. That is the real meaning of a shorter kill chain. It is not simply a technical improvement. It changes behavior, timing, and control. Russian units are being pushed into a battlefield where movement itself carries tactical risk. This turns Russian advance into a dangerous act, because the road is no longer just a route to the fight. It has become part of the fight itself. The interaction between the two sides is becoming very clear. Ukraine is using information, speed, and coordination to create pressure before direct contact even begins. Russia is being forced to move under a sky where visibility can quickly turn into pursuit. One side is shaping events through awareness. The other is losing freedom through exposure. That difference matters because it affects tempo. The force that sees first and reacts first often decides what happens next, while the force on the road is left responding to danger that may already be too close. The deeper problem is that once this pattern repeats enough times, every road starts to feel watched, every halt starts to feel dangerous, and every delay begins to carry a cost beyond a single vehicle. What makes this strike so important is that it did not just destroy a Russian weapon, but likely damage the timing and shape of a wider attack. Because on this battlefield, a target carrying men or ammunition is no longer only a machine moving forward. It is part of a larger system that depends on arriving at the right place at the right moment. That is why the sighting of the TOS-1A Sontsepyok mattered so much. This is a heavy thermobaric rocket system designed to crush fortified positions and hit troops hiding inside trenches, bunkers, or covered areas. When such a platform appears near an active sector, it usually means more than firepower is coming. It suggests preparation for a stronger push, because weapons like this are meant to soften resistance before other forces move in. The moment it was seen, while still loaded and getting ready to operate, the target already carried more meaning than its steel frame alone. When the drone struck, the result was not simply one vehicle burning on camera. The key detail was that the launcher was carrying ammunition, and that changed the entire effect of the hit. Instead of a contained loss, the strike triggered a much more violent blast, the kind that can send fragments wider, destroy the platform beyond repair, and wipe out any immediate chance of that weapon joining the coming action. A hit like that does not stay limited to one point on the ground. It ripples outward through the plan that depended on that system being available. The battlefield value of that moment becomes even clearer when its layers are broken down. Russia does not only lose an expensive combat asset. It can also lose the rockets loaded on it, the crew needed to operate it, and the pressure that weapon was supposed to create against Ukrainian positions. That last part matters most. A thermobaric launcher is dangerous not only because of what it destroys, but because of what it enables afterward. If that system was meant to open the way for another move, then destroying it before it fires means more than stopping one machine. It means breaking the first step of a sequence before the sequence can begin. The same logic applies to other targets that may look less dramatic at first glance. A truck carrying infantry is not only transporting soldiers, it is delivering manpower to a point of pressure. A vehicle bringing ammunition is not only moving cargo, it is extending the life of the attack ahead. A supply carrier that has just arrived near the front is not merely parked. It is part of the effort to keep a contested position active. When one drone hits at that exact moment, the damage happens on several levels at once. Men can be lost, equipment can burn, supplies can disappear. The attack those resources were meant to support can slow down or fail before it fully starts. This is where the real logic of the battlefield begins to shift. A low-cost drone is no longer valuable only because it can destroy something expensive. Its real value comes from hitting the target at the moment when that target is carrying the most tactical meaning. On a battlefield like this, one accurate drone hit can reshape events far beyond the target itself. And if a relatively cheap strike can stop an entire deployment at exactly the right moment, then is the cost logic of war now being turned upside down. What makes this stage of the fighting even more severe is that hiding itself is starting to lose meaning, because the battlefield is no longer punishing only movement in the open. It is now punishing the belief that cover alone can still protect men, weapons, and ammunition once drones begin searching from above. Ukrainian drone crews are not only chasing vehicles on roads or striking machines caught in motion. They are following infantry who dive into bushes after being spotted. They are tracking soldiers who rush into damaged houses and hope broken walls will hide them. They are finding positions dug into wooded areas, where artillery crews once trusted trees, shadows, and rough terrain to reduce the danger. They are also uncovering supply points and ammunition caches hidden inside structures or tucked into closed spaces that look secure from ground level. What appears concealed to the men below can look exposed from the air once the search begins. The reason this is happening is not hard to understand. Drones see the battlefield from angles that ground troops cannot control, and that advantage changes everything. A soldier lying still beside brush may think the shape of his body is lost in the terrain, yet a drone looking down can pick up the outline, the path he took, or the slight disturbance around him. A ruined house may look solid enough to break sight from one direction, but the roof can be damaged, the walls can be open, and the entry points can remain visible from above. In poor light, that pressure does not disappear. Thermal cameras can continue the search and separate a human presence from the colder ground around it. This is where the interaction between both sides becomes much sharper. Russian forces are trying to protect men and firepower by pushing them into tighter, more hidden terrain. Ukraine is using drones to cut through that sense of security and turn shelter into a temporary delay rather than real protection. The result is a battlefield where concealment is being tested again and again, and in many cases it is failing under sustained observation. That matters because it affects more than survival in one moment. It affects how long units can hold a position, how confidently crews can prepare weapons, and how much time soldiers believe they have before the next threat arrives. The pattern becomes clearer when the sequence is followed step by step. A lone fighter is seen moving, then drops into bushes. The drone does not lose him. It keeps searching, then strikes. A group reaches a damaged structure and disappears inside. The drone circles, waits, and attacks the building or catches movement around it. A gun position sits inside a tree line, carefully placed to reduce exposure. The overhead search still finds the location, and the fire mission that was meant to stay hidden becomes the next target. A storage point with ammunition looks protected by walls or forest cover, yet once identified, it stops being a reserve and becomes a liability. Each scene looks different at first, but the rule behind them is the same. Once a target has been found, escaping the chain of pressure becomes much harder than before. That is why the larger issue is not only that a few hidden positions are being exposed. The larger issue is that the whole idea of safe concealment is coming under pressure. Forest belts, dugouts, damaged homes, and covered positions are still useful, but they no longer offer the certainty they once did. They may reduce risk for a short time, yet they do not end the search. On this battlefield, being unseen for a moment is no longer the same as being safe. And that leaves a serious question hanging over the fight. In a war where FPV coverage is this dense, are woods and fortifications still real shelter? Or are they becoming places that only add a few extra minutes before the strike arrives? What matters most in this phase is that destroying a single vehicle is no longer the main objective, because breaking the enemy's ability to see, communicate, and respond can create a much deeper impact across the battlefield. These devices may look less harmful compared to armored vehicles or artillery pieces, yet they carry a critical role in keeping units connected. Through them, commands are passed, warnings are shared, and drones are guided toward targets. When such a node is active, it acts like a central point that links observation, decision, and action into one flow. Once it is located, it becomes more than a piece of equipment. It becomes a gateway to the entire local network. When a drone strike hits one of these antennas, the effect spreads beyond the immediate damage. The physical destruction of the device is only the first layer. The deeper result is the sudden loss of coordination in that area. Units that depended on that connection may struggle to receive updates. Drone operators may lose control or face delays. Fire support may become slower or less accurate because the flow of information is disrupted. In that moment, the battlefield does not simply lose a tool. It loses clarity, and without clarity, reaction becomes uncertain. This creates a clear interaction between both sides. Russian forces rely on communication lines to maintain awareness, guide their own UAVs, and keep units aligned with each other. Ukraine, by contrast, is focusing on identifying and striking those connection points to weaken that structure. Instead of trying to destroy every vehicle or every position, the approach is to hit the parts that allow the system to function as a whole. When those parts are removed, even intact units can become less effective because they are no longer working together in real time. The importance of this approach becomes visible during active engagements. A unit that loses contact may hesitate because it no longer knows the situation around it. A drone team that cannot receive stable signals may fail to track targets or complete an attack. A group preparing to move may delay its action because it lacks confirmation or updated orders. These are not dramatic moments like explosions, yet they change outcomes in a quieter but powerful way. The battlefield begins to slow down, fragment, and lose rhythm. This is where the analysis moves beyond simple destruction. The situation is no longer about counting how many vehicles were lost or how many strikes landed. It is about how the system behind those targets is being weakened step by step. Each antenna that is removed, each link that is broken, reduces the ability of Russian forces to respond quickly and coordinate under pressure. The effect builds over time, and it can shape how an entire sector behaves, even if many physical assets are still present. When this layer is combined with the earlier pressure on movement and concealment, the picture becomes clearer. Vehicles are at risk while moving. Hidden positions are no longer secure. Communication is no longer stable. These pressures do not act alone. They reinforce each other. A unit that cannot hide well becomes easier to track. A unit that cannot communicate well becomes slower to react. A unit that is slower to react becomes more exposed to the next strike. That is why the battlefield now feels like it is under pressure from several directions at once. The threat is not coming only from what can be seen directly. It is also coming from what cannot be coordinated in time. And when that happens, the damage is not limited to one target. It spreads through decisions, timing, and control. So the real question becomes harder to answer. Which loss carries more weight in this kind of war, losing a single vehicle, or losing the ability to see, communicate, and act together across an entire area? What makes this phase of the battlefield so critical is that the smallest movements are now carrying the highest risk. Because light transport like motorcycles and ATVs are no longer low-priority targets but have become essential links that drones actively hunt. This shift is changing how supply and movement work at the front. These light vehicles are chosen because they are fast, flexible, and able to move through narrow paths where larger machines cannot go. They are often used to carry ammunition, water, fuel, and basic equipment to positions that are already under pressure. They also move wounded soldiers back, deliver batteries and spare parts, and support the constant flow that keeps units operating. What looks simple at first is actually the backbone of daily survival on the front line. That is why their loss carries more weight than expected. When a motorcycle or ATV is hit, it is not just one vehicle gone. It is the cargo that disappears with it, the task that remains unfinished, and the unit that does not receive what it needs on time. A single strike can delay resupply, break a chain of support, and force others to rethink how and when they move. The battlefield sequence shows how this pressure builds. A motorcycle moves along a narrow route that seems less visible than a main road. An ATV carries supplies across uneven ground, relying on speed and a smaller profile to reduce risk. These movements are not offensive actions. They are necessary steps to keep positions alive. Yet once a drone detects them, the situation changes quickly. The vehicle is tracked, followed, and then struck at the moment when escape becomes hardest. This creates a pattern where even the smallest logistical movement becomes uncertain. Units cannot rely on simple transport anymore. Every trip forward carries risk. Every return trip can be interrupted. When this happens repeatedly, the impact spreads beyond one location. A delay in one delivery can be managed. Several delays begin to weaken the ability to hold ground. This is where the deeper effect becomes visible. Frontline pressure is not maintained only by heavy weapons or large formations. It depends on steady and continuous support. Soldiers need ammunition to keep fighting, fuel to keep moving, and basic supplies to stay operational. When those inputs become harder to deliver, the entire structure begins to strain. Men start conserving ammunition because resupply is no longer certain. Movement becomes more cautious because every route may be watched. Recovery efforts slow down because transport is less reliable. Over time, holding a position demands more effort while offering less stability. That is how repeated small losses begin to create larger consequences across a wider area. The interaction between both sides highlights the strategy behind this. Russia depends on these light vehicles to sustain frontline activity. Ukraine does not need to destroy every major asset to apply pressure. By targeting motorcycles, ATVs, and similar transport, it can narrow the flow that feeds both manpower and firepower. Each successful strike forces a delay, a change of route, or another attempt under the same threat. That repetition matters more than any single hit. What stands out at the end of this story is not just that more Russian vehicles were destroyed, but that the battlefield itself now seems to punish almost every visible action. Tanks, supply trucks, thermobaric systems, hidden positions, communication antennas, and even motorcycle convoys are all being pulled into the same pattern. That pattern is simple. Once a target is seen, it can be tracked. And once that keeps happening across roads, forests, shelters, and supply lines, the real damage goes far beyond one explosion on one part of the front. This is what makes the situation more serious than a normal string of drone strikes. Ukraine is not only destroying hardware, it is using drones to squeeze several layers of Russian battlefield activity at the same time. At the same time, war is always a race of adaptation, and that keeps the bigger question open. Can Russia find a way to slow this aerial pressure and rebuild room to move? Or will Ukraine widen this advantage and make the sky even more decisive in more sectors? Drop a comment and share which side is more likely to adapt faster in a battlefield where almost every movement can be hunted from above. If this report helped make sense of how the war is changing, hit like, share the video, and subscribe to Military Force for more deep battlefield analysis.